It sounds beautiful. This is such a moment for me right now because I'm reunited with, you have a different name now, and it's Zaddy. Zaddy Haggerty is in the building. David, welcome. You are officially going to be a Zaddy. Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, I really struggle with this because I am so excited to be a dad, but I hate posting on the internet so much that I feel like there's people that still don't know, and then they just shame you because they shame you about everything. And they're like, I literally had a conversation with someone being like, why haven't you told X, Y, and Z that you're pregnant yet?
Because it's none of your damn business.
Don't want to. And they're like, no, it's about them. It's not about you. And I'll just like, so
let me tell you,
the world now knows
Sturgis
I'm going to point everyone to your podcast if they want to know.
Okay, so this is the official announcement. David Haggerty is officially going to be a Zaddy. And I want you to know, like, going on that topic, which I really would like to talk about just for like a quick second, because I don't want this to be the like mom and dad podcast hour, but I just want to like touch on this for a second as Lady is in the background crying. I'm now almost 7 months postpartum. And, well, it's been a journey to say the least. But what I'm going to say is Sturgis, my partner, my husband, my daughter's Zaddy, if you will, like your Zaddy, if you will, does not post on his social media anything. But he also never posted that I was pregnant, never posted that I had the baby, never posted that he's like now officially a Zaddy, like none of that, because you know what? I don't think it's anyone's business. And a friend of mine is currently pregnant right now, and she just announced it. And she was getting so much hate. I'm going to do a whole episode about that from so many moms about things that she was doing, why she didn't announce it already. And it's just like, it's no one's business. If we are really good friends and you're going to make an effort to like call me and be like, what's new? Let's shoot the shit together. Maybe then I'm going to let you know what the truth is, like had a baby or I'm pregnant or whatever it may be. I just don't think it's anyone's business. And I am like, kudos to you, David, for sending everyone to EmotionAL support to let them know that you are officially a Zaddy.
I mean, I do what I can.
You do what you can.
It's just weird. I never post about anything, literally anything. And then people think it's going to be different because I'm just like, it feels like children.
It feels like a production.
Expecting moms. No, that's what you're saying. Like you've become the content.
Sure.
And it's just like, it's a weird world we live in. And I'm like, I want to have photos of my child for me. And my close family. And like, that just means that the public doesn't see them. But now like people are like, I literally had somebody asked me today, literally like an hour ago. I was like, oh, we're expecting. And they're like, you don't seem excited about it because you're not posting about it. And I'm like,
are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, David, we know that I held that in as like a big secret that I was pregnant for a very long time.
But like people,
you know,
you're being a dude.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I struggle with it still daily. It was funny, actually. Last night, Sturgis and I were talking. We have this one friend. And he's amazing. And he's like brutally honest about shit, like brutally honest. And we were like, he hasn't really been active on our social media lately, like on my social media lately. He hasn't really been like asking us to hang out recently. And he was someone that was like, never turn into the mom person. Like no one wants to see your baby 24 hours a day. Like no one wants to see this. And I was like, do you think that I offended him? I was like, I need to have a conversation with him and ask him, like, am I posting too many photos about Lady? Because it becomes this thing, right, where I'm an open book, and I'm probably too much of an open book where I want people to know every single detail going on in my life so they know that they're not alone. But then there's a part of me that's like, I don't really want people to see this moment of Lady, or I don't want to see like show this milestone, mostly because I know what it's like being a mom and like your child not hitting certain milestones, and you see other people who are posting and they're like, my baby is 3 months old and it's like smoking and having like a martini already. And you're just like, what the fuck? Like, how did you make that milestone? You know? And so
if my child's first word isn't martini, I'm sending them back.
I think that would be like the most brilliant. But I mean, that's literally like the thought process as to where my mind is, as to like how every post means something. And I don't want to like offend the people that are following me just like for the body. You know what I mean? That are like, she's a hot bitch. Like, I'm going to follow her. You know what I mean? Like, it's overwhelming. It's exhausting. It's like, where do you even start? You don't.
That's the choice I've made. You just refuse to start.
Yeah.
And like, I have I like hear you. Like, I feel like it's okay for men to do it.
Right.
But like, if you're a female and have a child and you don't do it, you get shamed. Oh. Or they're like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, it's so
the mom shamers.
Insane.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I don't even think Annie hasn't even like posted an Instagram of our wedding. You know what I mean? Like, it's and like people judge her for it. And I'm like, why? It's not fucking business.
It's not your business. And I think that that's what we need to remember is it's not our business. I think that, you know, kind of veering off path, but staying on path here for a moment. I want to talk about something that a lot of people were writing me recently. And I thought, what a great way to start off the new year, the new season of EmotionAL support, the new beauty in the brain is people have been asking me, what is something that triggers you? Like, what is something that may set you off into a manic episode? And I kind of wanted to talk about, you know, not only just like the manic episodes and triggers, but like, what is something that scientifically we could maybe change, like with our bodies, with our food intake? What is something that we can do to kind of always make sure that we don't get those triggers? Or if we do have those moments, whether you're bipolar, living with bipolar like us, whether you're not, whatever it may be, what is something that, you know, scientifically you have maybe learned research wise that's setting these things off for us, and what we could do to try to pull it down a notch? Is that a weird question?
No.
But that's something I've been getting
It's like one of my favorite questions in many ways.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah,
but like, all right, so we got to do the weird, we got to do like the weird deep part into science and the stuff that people don't care about. But let me just frame it. Like most people, when they study, this is sort of like rooted in the world of drug addiction more than it is rooted in the world of mental health problems. But I think the two are actually quite similar.
Yeah.
We think about people that misuse drugs as like sort of three cycles, or like three parts of a circular cycle. Like your binge use, like people take a bunch of drug.
Right.
You have the second cycle, which is like acute withdrawal effects. And then you have the third cycle is craving. And then that drives you to take more drug. So like you go through these cyclical phases of, for alcohol, you binge drink a bunch of alcohol. You feel like shit when you're hungover. And then you get anxious and you crave more. Yes. And you just like do the loop. Right. It works like this for many drugs. It works like this for panic attacks. Like you have a really strong response, like physiologically, to an
like
insult.
The fight or flight response kind of
response,
feeling, right?
You go through that phase where you wind down, where you're like, you don't really feel anxious about it happening yet because you're still like dealing with the fact that you're coming down from it in real time. You're like trying like active coping mechanisms of like breathing exercises or going to the hospital. You know what I mean? Like you have the event. You come down from the event, and then there's some long period of time before you have the next one where you feel anxious, like, oh, is this going to happen again?
Right, right.
A lot of people focus on the first two, like drug use, drug withdrawal. Like it's an opioid crisis. There's fentanyl in the streets.
And also what we can talk about it with food, right?
Yeah, food, binge eating, cyclical, like eating patterns, like all of it. I think the really interesting part is we assume that people are no longer being afflicted by drug misuse or anxiety when they stop going through the cycle. Okay. But like when you stop going through the cycle, you get frozen in that last anticipatory preoccupation phase of like You're somewhere after your last withdrawal, but somewhere also before your first binge episode again.
Right.
Like, hopefully it never happens again, but that's like the frame that you're frozen in.
Right.
And there's this really interesting world of research and like human, what gets sort of like talked out to clinicians or amongst friends of this idea that's called sign tracking.
Sign, like SIGN?
GN, yeah, like a sign that you would see on the side of a street.
Uh-huh.
This idea, if you were someone who used IV drugs, the sight of seeing a needle would trigger the whole thing over again.
Wow.
Like that would be the thing that initiated the craving.
So like even like going to the doctor or something, if you had to get a shot, let's say, like that would, wow.
So the trigger that is visual, like I was an IV drug user or I drank a bunch of beers, and even though I haven't had a drink in 30 years, I walk into a bar and the sight and the smell and the sounds and the dim lights just like instantly trigger me. And I'm like, I must have a drink. There are like crazy stories of people who were formerly incarcerated, have become sober, that were doing 15, 20-year sentences. They get out of prison, they go back to their home communities, and because they're back in that environment, that environmental trigger and cue, instant relapse. They haven't had a craving while they were in prison.
Right.
But because the environment changed, because the context changed, because there was some visual cue, because they saw someone that they've never seen in the last 10 years that they used to do drugs with, or that would be a trigger for them, they instantly relapse. Like this idea of there are signs that could be physical, emotional, environmental that start the process again. I think is something that is poorly communicated, because we always sort of just blame people, especially people that use drugs. But like, you think about it, it's like, oh, like I've been doing really well. I've been going to therapy. I've been talking to people. I've been, like practicing, meditation and other self-coping mechanisms. And then like you have a manic episode and everyone's like, well, what did you do wrong?
Right.
It has nothing to do with the environment or the stressors or like the other things that you can't control happening to you. It's always, what did you do that caused this to happen? Yeah. So I think that like the sign tracking stuff helps pivot that, and to like wrap this fully back to the question of like, what are triggers? We obviously know what like the basic triggers are, like if you're someone who is bipolar, like there are substances you shouldn't consume, like people that take drugs that are considered uppers or like make your heart rate go up, it forces people to have manic episodes. It'd be completely fine.
I didn't. It's so weird.
But
it's
because
like,
the
I didn't
physiological,
even know that, and I'm like living with this.
But I mean, like think about it. Like if you take it, there are people that have panic attacks because they run on treadmills. Like the process of getting your heart rate up.
Whoa.
Because it links your body back to being in that state of flight or fight. They can't do it. There's people that like intense exercise will trigger panic attacks in because it feels the exact same. Your body doesn't know how to like differentiate. So like if you think about, and like again, that's something you're doing. Like you're running on a treadmill.
But I will say that's almost a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's almost a good thing to know, because like that's something I did not know, for instance, right? So if I'm working out like crazy or something, or I'm taking a dance class or whatever it may be, and I start to have a panic attack, it's good. It's something that's informative where I can go, okay, you know what's happening to me is a false panic attack. It's really like my mind is being tricked by my body from the physical heartbeat. So like, I'm fine. Like it's okay. Don't worry. And like, if you're able to identify a trigger, I think that is so helpful when it comes to panic attacks, manic episodes, just anxiety in general in life. I think that's great. So please go on.
So I think that there are things that sort of make sense physically,
right?
That are triggers that will cause you to ramp yourself up or slow yourself down.
Yeah,
like I think the like exercise, taking drugs that are stimulants, like putting yourself in stressful situations that are like, like, oh, I happen to relapse when I decide at work that I'm going to work for 100 hours straight every week. Right. You know what I mean? Like there are things that you can do that will ramp your body up. And then you're like, you're not actively thinking like, oh, is this going to be a trigger for me? Because like you think you're like, oh, I'm strong, I'm feeling good, I'm like in one of the better places right now, so I can
my
take
zone.
on this.
Right.
And then you're like, oh shit, why did the floor come out from underneath me? And
right.
You're like, oh. But it usually takes until after you've calmed down to like look back and be like, oh, that's the reason why it happened. So like,
but sometimes I feel like and I think that that's right, because I think that there are times where I'm like, I have everything put together, like everything is fucking great, like, and then out of nowhere, it just it like blows up, and I'm just like, but why? You know, why? Yeah. And it's really like figuring out, like, did I eat something that would have triggered it? Did I exercise or something, like, you know, because I'm not doing the drugs, like, and I'm not, and I don't even drink, you know? So it's like, you wonder, like, what could it be, these little things, if it wasn't.
Yeah. And I think that, like, what I'm saying is like, you know, like, again, I will make it more complex because this is what I like to do. It is it is rarely the case that it's any single trigger. I mean, like, if you're doing lines of coke in the bathroom, like,
sure, right.
But
like you're asking
what you're
for
saying,
it.
yeah. But like, you know, like, it's usually the repetitive or like combinatorial effects of, I'm eating bad, I have a slightly increased stress load, I stopped working out because I'm too busy. The biggest trigger that we all miss is sleep.
Yeah.
That people just like think that it's okay. Like, if you are not sleeping 8 hours a day, you are not a superhuman. You are just unhealthy.
Right.
Like at it just like, you know, like, not to bring it back to the parenting thing, but like, you know, like, in many ways, for the first 6 months of your life as a parent, like, your brain function is measurably like diminished because you're not sleeping.
Yeah. And they call it mom brain, but I will tell you, it is more than just mom brain.
Yeah. No, it's real. Like, you are
totally real.
Deprived. Like, the way we tortured people was by making them not sleep. Like,
right. It's like, so let's do the math and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's usually like, people want to pinpoint it to one single thing. They want to be like, oh, I changed this part of my diet, or I stopped, you know, it's still technically dry January, which is like my favorite misnomer of a month, where people stop drinking for the entire month.
I know. I never did that.
I like to do it in February because it's the shortest month out of the year.
Ooh, I like that. So it's easier. Ooh,
it's easier. But I mean, like, this is the thing. Like, people like want to focus on individual life changes and then define those things as triggers. But like, usually it's the sequence of them. Right. Like, you know, like, I'm like, oh, if you're not sleeping 8 hours, like, you're broken. But like, in reality, there are many people that sleep less than 8 hours and are completely fine. But like, if you're sleeping less than 8 hours, plus the fact that you're eating bad, plus the fact that you have an increased stress load, like, it's very hard to define what the trigger is, but it's usually the combination of all of them. Well, and like, no, and I'll make it more complicated for people, but like, you know, like, people want a simple answer. They're like, oh, you're doing this wrong. If you fix this thing, you will feel better. And like, it's never that linear. No. And I will say, like, the perfect example for me is, I have been feeling very defeated this week. I've been feeling very stressed. There's just been a lot of, I wouldn't say it's like, I wrote depressed like online one day, and I was like, I'm not feeling depressed. Like, that's the wrong thing. I'm feeling defeated. It's like more like I'm climbing up that mountain, and I'm like right to the top. And then it's like a goat shows up, and the goat decides to like kick me in the face and like push me down the hill again. Like, that's how I've been feeling. And I've noticed that I've been, we'll use the word triggered, you know, by a lot of things that will just like, you know, get me going, get me hot, get me spicy. And I've been having very angry spells, if you will. And I've been wondering, it's like, well, I never sleep at all because I first of all, before baby, I never slept, and I still never sleep now because of baby. So I'm like, well, that couldn't be it, right? Like, so I'm like, there must be something else. Well, my wisdom teeth came in. I was told I never had wisdom teeth. Suddenly they show up a week ago. Whoever gave you that advice doesn't know how to use an x-ray machine.
Well, what's crazy is I had my teeth x-rayed like 2 years ago, and it wasn't there. But what's weird is I've been reading all these, I've been reading weird conspiracy theories. And
my favorite thing to do online.
I love a conspiracy theory. And people have been saying, because if you breastfeed for an X amount of time in your hormone rush, like suddenly, like you become not an adolescent, you become a woman, and it could be triggered by that, so there's that. But like, that was an example of like, oh fuck, like, yes, that is why I have a short fuse, if you will, because I have a constant headache that's not gone away. I have teeth up and down that are impacted, that are going the wrong direction, that are just hitting the wrong spot. So it's like, and I try to keep as much of a Zen cool as I possibly can when it comes to the baby. So I'm like suppressing that emotion. And like, so if something, happens to me, and if someone's an asshole, like I'm going to either lose it and scream at you, or I'm going to cry. Like, it's where I'm at right now in my life. Like, it's where I'm at. And it's that panicky feeling that I have constantly. But it's good to remember it's different things, right? It's like you said, it's multiple things.
And like, I like want to actually push back on this, because like I try and talk to this. I'm in the clinic, when I talk to patients, when I like talk to therapists, like I like being in a medical school, you get this like unique world of like, I get to teach classes that doctors take. So like you can like bias there, like how clinical medicine is going to be practiced, even if you're not the one doing it. But it's like this is like a very common thing you hear when someone sits down in therapy. It is very usually like, it's very unusual that it's like one specific thing in their life. Like it is usually this combination. And then like the question I try and convince clinicians to ask is like, I wouldn't argue that your wisdom teeth are a trigger. Like I wouldn't argue that being sleep deprived is a trigger. It's something ahead of that. Like you're responding to already being triggered in those moments. It's not like that was the first time you felt bad. Like you're going into these situations. You like woke up today feeling off. Yeah. Like you wouldn't say that today was the trigger.
No.
Like, it's when you started feeling that emotion, but it sort of happened sometime in the past already. So like we do this dance where like, I think a lot of the time
it's been baking.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. You falsely assign something to be the trigger. It's like, oh, I'm feeling bad. It must be something that I ate. Nope. It was something that happened before that. Like it might have amplified it. People being assholes to you on the street. Like people like, like having pain in your mouth, like these sorts of things like make it worse. But it's that plus some other thing that we haven't identified yet that is making people feel bad. Because like all of these things on their own are annoyances, but they're not things that drive people.
Do you
and not
think
in your
that
case,
it matters what? No, totally. But like, do you think that it even matters? Like, is it even relevant that there is like we figure out what the trigger is, or do you think if we identify what is causing the root issue of it, that then it will be an easier thing to like go through? Like, or is it just like, who cares?
Did you see this Rick Rubin 60 Minutes interview, Anderson Cooper, whatever?
Is that who with the long beard? That was him. I didn't know. I didn't see it. No.
I'm like, this is a very Rick Rubin answer, but like it matters in the sense that it's not identifying what the cause is. It's the process of learning how to identify what the cause is that provides people. And I'm not like trying to be some like, I am like a hippie weirdo, like sweat lodges in Mexico. Like I get it. But like, I'm also like, there is like.
Zaddy goes to a sweat lodge once in his life and now he's a hippie.
I was a hippie a long time ago. But what like, I'm saying is like, you like, there's something about like many reasons for why the opioid crisis happened is because you are in pain. I can give you a pill. The pain goes away. Right. Like if you do that a number of times, like we run into a lot of issues. But like this idea that there is some medical intervention that will instantaneously relieve your symptoms for some things like pain or, like heart disease or insulin, like they exist. But the issue that we run into with like emotional distress, like mental anguish, is that does not exist. So like many people want the answer. And I could give you the answer. There are many therapists that like if you record the first session that they ever have with the patient, they give the patient the answer. In the first session, the patient has absolutely no idea that they've done it. Like you have to go through the process.
Right. To get
and like
there.
Going through the process is the medicine. Like if you're someone who's like, oh, I've identified my trigger and you're still feeling bad, you are just fundamentally wrong.
Right.
Like you haven't identified it.
Right.
Because if you did, you wouldn't feel bad anymore.
Right.
Like people want to be
told. You would feel the relief.
Is.
Like you would be relieved.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like people want to be told what the answer is so bad, especially when it comes to like things like mental distress, because they just want it to go away. And then you will like see people who are like actively struggling or coping, and like not to their like they don't know any better. Like I'm not trying to make fun of them, but they will try and convince you with all of their might that they have solved their problem and it was this specific trigger and now I'm great. And like you can see the pain in their face while they're trying to tell you that they've solved it. And I'm like, you haven't done the process. If you did the process and you found the answer, this would be a much different conversation tone. We
would wrap this up a little faster. Right.
So like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not so much like I understand people being like, what is the thing? It's sleep, it's diet, it's environmental toxin, it's your food, it's the genetics that you have. Like I can give you all the answers and in what combinations they might show up in. Right. And I can give you like a sheet that says like, this is what's wrong with you. It's not going to make you feel any better.
Yeah.
You have to engage with understanding, when do those triggers happen? What are things that make me feel uncomfortable? When they start to happen, how do I talk myself out of them? Like those are the skills that matter. Identifying what the sign is, like doing the sign tracking behavior, identifying it isn't going to make you feel better.
Yep.
It's learning how to respond once you see the sign is the thing that's going to provide relief. So I hear people, but I also
I love that answer though. I hope that can help a lot of people because I know it's helping me already.
But it's like a lot of people that are writing into you probably have a pretty good idea of what their triggers are.
Yeah.
So like, good, you've done the first step, you've done the identification. Now the second step is, when does it happen? How can you stop yourself? What is the response that you have? There are people, like, especially for people, like I'll use the extreme cases again of like, like drug addiction. Like there are people that struggle to stop. And like, that doesn't mean that they're wrong or bad or invalid. That just means they need extra amount of help. Like this isn't something that you have to do alone or isolated or by yourself, or the answer should be easy to come to. But like if your trigger is something that requires you to seek medical attention or talk to a therapist or make major life changes, those are things that you should do. Those are not things that you should be like, oh, I need to make these huge changes and that's scary, so I'm just going to pretend it's a different trigger.
Right.
Like you're never going to get anywhere. So I just
what would you recommend for someone
to go.
Right. And so what would you recommend for people to do? Like, let's say, like, as an example, like, obviously you're not saying this like as a therapist, like saying it like this, but something that you would do.
This is not medical advice, asterisks.
No. This is just like, would you maybe like, I don't know. The first thing that comes to me is like, maybe write it down. Like when you are feeling triggered or you're feeling upset, like write it down. What did you eat? What time is it at? What was your sleep? Like kind of journaling it and keeping it so you're aware and you can compare.
Huge. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but like my experience is like whenever I go, if I haven't switched therapists in a long time, I'm like now very lucky. Like I have this fantastic woman who is like a mid 2000s emo, like punk lady still. Sick. Just like frozen in time. And I'm like, I love you. I want to bottle you up and like take you home.
Make you a perfume. Yeah.
Respectfully.
I like, yes.
But like, I think that like the experience that I've had is like when I've switched therapists or when I started going to therapy, a lot of them try and force you to journal, not because they want you to like write down your feelings. They know what your feelings are. They're like written across your face when you sit down. But like in a non-clinical setting, like we have really bad memories, especially when we're stressed and sleep deprived. Like the act of writing down what you think your triggers are when they're happening is like great data to go back and look at.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's the data. That's the scientist in us. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. But it's like you don't want to use like, oh, I had a panic attack at, 9:47 in the morning after I ate Cheerios for breakfast to try and make any life changes. You want to use that data to be like, oh, I had another panic attack and it looked similar and it happened at the same time. Or, you know, like, especially like, you know, the thing that, and I sort of do a bad job at talking about this too. And it's something I need to get better at, but like for women, like the hormone changes that you're going through on a monthly cycle, it's very important to write these things down to understand if this is a hormonal imbalance, or like a lot of women that we're seeing that show up in the clinic from ages 16 to 26. It's the first time they're on birth control. It blows their hormones out. And now they're like, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Yeah. And they show up and they're not even like, it's my birth control. And they have no recollection of it. And we're the people that are like, oh, wait a minute. Like, are you on contraceptives? Are they low hormone? Are they high hormone? Like, are we pushing too much progesterone? I keep having panic attacks the third week of the month. I don't know why. And you're like, oh, if you don't journal those things, if you don't write them down, if you don't come prepared, not only for yourself, but for others that are trying to help as well with like factual information about when these things are happening, what the triggers are, it's very hard for people to do effective medicine once that happens.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that would have helped me as like for me as an example, like when I was 15 and I was having, you know, suicidal thoughts and ideations and actions, and I was not a suicidal human being, right? Let's say that. And I was being put on antidepressants, which were making my highs higher and my lows lower when I was living with bipolar disorder. I also was newly on birth control, like probably a year before, because I had irregular periods. And so they put me on birth control. And it's like, you know, I have such a hard time with birth control because I see so many people, like not only physically do their bodies change, but mentally, like that's something that's not talked about enough, how much it changes. But at the same time, like I understand, like you don't want to have a baby. It's the easiest, best, safest thing that you can do besides wearing a condom. Like, there you go. Like, it's great, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, you know, like,
so I understand, but it's gotta be something that changes because it destroys women. It destroys women physically and mentally. Like, absolutely.
And it's really
so I'm not surprised that that's when you see it at that age coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it's like obviously hormones. Those hormones then can be like exacerbated by birth control. But like, I also would like to note, like, physicians that were trained 20 years ago, were in residency, were in med school. The types of contraceptives that you saw were the 28-day punch-out packs that you would take by mouth with the 5 sugar pills at the end.
Right.
The majority of young women, people that identify female presenting, that are on birth control now, are not those packets. It's IUDs, it's shots, it's implantables in the arm. Those change your hormones much differently than physicians were trained on.
Well, that's interesting you say that, but though, because when I went into the doctor recently, right, the only options that I had for low estrogen, like low progesterone, all of that, were still those packets. I didn't have the options of other things. Like they would say, like, "Oh, do you want an IUD?" But I mean, that was like, I was like, I don't really want anything else up my hoo-ha right now, you know.
That's fair, yeah. But I'm like, look, like, and it's like, you have to, like, there's an additional layer of complexity on top of it now too, where people will get IUDs inserted. The half-life to hit the maximal dose of like whatever we're doing, no estrogen IUDs, 7 to 8 months. So like people are getting IUDs put in. They're at the age where their hormones are changing. They're starting to have panic attacks. They're starting to develop eating disorders. They're like, and they forget because they're not actively taking a birth control pill every day. And then they're like, I don't know why this is happening. And like, it's a very easy follow-up question to be like, oh, wait a minute. I had an IUD put in. Like, oh, I had one of the implantables put in my arm for birth control. I get the monthly shots. Like, if you're not doing something every day and you're like trying to figure out what the signs and symptoms are, you're not going to remember them. Like, it's so hopefully this is the
reminder to you. Like, hopefully David Zaddy's reminding you, like.
But I think it's like important to like, I'm making this point of like, it is important to journal these things when they happen. But if you're journaling triggers in chronological order, and then you're inserting changes in, I moved apartments, changed cities, I've been traveling a bunch, I got an IUD in, I got an IUD out, I'm trying to have kids and it's not working, I'm trying to have kids and it's working too fast. Like these sort of health problems that we can monitor without, putting a blood pressure cuff on, or like, like the things that you are physically aware of that are life changes, on top of what are triggers for me that make me feel more manic, less manic, more anxious, less anxious, is like the most powerful tool that you can develop.
Yep.
And it's something that you can literally do on the Notes app on your iPhone. Like, it is very simple. We just don't ever think to do it in the moment. Right.
Now, I have a question for you, a follow-up to all of this. What about, we talk about the hormones changing and how birth control can be part of this and all of that. But what about from from the male presenting side? How can, do we see different hormonal triggers, maybe different ages through that, or things that we can identify and say, oh, well, this is happening because of X, Y, and Z. Like, we're able to easily say it with the females, with the birth control. Can we say it with male as well?
I think it's harder. And like, look, like as a research scientist, I will tell you flat out with like a very large, like, confidence that male, especially teenagers, are cycling hormones as well, but they just don't have vaginas and they don't bleed. So it is much more difficult to get people on board with this idea. I think that it's very tough. I think that a lot of it starts with education, and like, if you think about like being a mom, like it is majoritively, here I am running into like old world thinking, but like the way that I think has been conceptualized, the way that's still written about in textbooks, like the cultural and societal expectation is that mothers speak to their daughters about hormone changes in like becoming feminine.
Right.
Has any dad
becoming a woman?
But like, stereotypically, has any father had a conversation with their son about something similar?
I mean, I don't know.
Maybe about
not my
women,
dad,
but like not about men going through puberty.
Changes.
In a way that doesn't involve growing like genital hairs and like literally quote, air quotes, like having your balls drop. Like other than that, that is like the extent of that conversation. I'm like, oh, like, why do you think it is that most 14 to 18-year-olds are the first time they ever present with a mental health diagnosis is because it also lines up with their hormone changes.
Right.
And it's just like, oh, boys being boys, like you should be fighting, you should be like playing in the dirt, like you should be doing things that are like manly and developing like a sense of masculinity. And like, look, like many people, both men and women, however you identify, whatever genitalia you were born with, whatever hormone imbalance that you have, the majority of them turn out fine. Like they go through this process, and more than 70% of them, I'm just like pulling numbers out of my ass right now. But what I mean? Like a large majority of them, it works itself out. But for the people that it doesn't, it goes horribly wrong in that age range. And we don't really do anything about it.
No, we ignore it. We're like, they're fine. They'll grow out of it. It's a phase.
They're developmentally delayed. You know what I mean? Like it's just the nonsense.
Put them in the field. Let them play some soccer. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm like, look, like I get it. Like this is why, like as a clinician, these opinions are my own, not my employer's or the university that I work for. Like all the disclaimers, but just like, this is why gender affirming care is deeply important. And when I say the words gender affirming care, I'm not talking about people that only transition. I'm talking about people that choose to say the biological sex that they were born and are like cis, but like also understanding what gender affirming care means for those people as well.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to all lives matter this, But like,
no, but you're being a sensitive, real human being.
Yeah. It is very important and something that we don't communicate, especially for mental health outcomes, for people who are cis-identifying, to understand what biological processes are going on in their own body.
Absolutely.
And how to understand those hormone changes, how to adequately, do mental health CPR and first aid for people, for themselves, around them, like beyond being someone who undergoes like a menstrual cycle and having to communicate like the physical, I must deal with this.
Right.
We don't really talk much about it or use it as an educational tool to be like, oh, these are also when a bunch of mental and hormone changes are about to occur. And here's how you prepare for them as well.
And here's
it's like one of the few physical signals that you get from a body that like a bunch of things are about to change, and like we sort of just squander it because like people are afraid to talk about it. And I'm like, this is such a waste. Like, people are out here looking for triggers. I'm like, here's the obvious one.
You're like, hello, right here. Like, it's happening.
Yeah. Have your boobs doubled in size? Like, maybe something's going to happen.
Maybe something's about to happen. Like, and enjoy if they did double in size. It means they're going to be really fun to play with. I mean, David, here we are, like, back, like nothing, no time has passed. No babies come. Like,
bro, it has been a minute. I've lived in like 3 different cities since we've last talked. I'm all over the place.
Literally, like, so many cities, so many children being born, about to be born.
Just one.
No, I had a child.
Please, just one.
I had a child, and you were having one. So there are children. There are 2. But oh my God, and I can't. I'm coughing, and I can't.
Oh my God, here it comes. Yeah, fix it in post.
Oh my God. But what's exciting is, here we are answering questions. So I think we just want to let everyone know who's listening right now. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We're going to be doing these a lot. Zaddy is here,
guys,
and then Zaddy's going to be on a break.
Me.
Yeah,
try
to stop him.